Since I spent about 3 years in Israel for internship in a few hospitals there, it came to my mind about doing research on why the Jews are intelligent. It goes without denial that Jews are ahead in all aspects of life such as engineering, music, science, and most obviously in business. Nearly 70% of world trade/business are held by the Jews, in cosmetics, food, fashion, arms, hotels, and film industries. During my second year, I was about to go back to California. This idea came to me and I was wondering why God gave this gift/ability to them. Is this a coincidence? Or is it man-made? Can intelligent Jews be produced like goods from a factory? My research took about 8 years to gather all the information as accurately as possible, like their food intake, culture, religion, initial preparation of pregnancy, etc., and I would compare them with other races. Let's start with initial preparation of pregnancy. In Israel, the first thing I noticed is that a pregnant mother would always sing and play the piano and would always try to solve mathematical problems together with her husband. I was very surprised to see the pregnant women always carry math books. Sometimes I would help her to solve some problems. I would ask, "Is this for your child in the womb?" She would answer, yes, to train the child still in the womb so that it would be a genius later on. She would solve maths problems without let up until the child is born. Another thing I noticed is about their food. The pregnant women loved to eat almonds and dates with milk. For lunch she would take bread and fish, without the head, salad mixed with almonds and other nuts. They believe fish is good for the depth of the brain and that fish head is bad for the brain. And also it is in the culture of the Jews for pregnant mothers to take cod liver oil. When I was invited for dinner, I noticed that they always like to eat fish, flesh and fillet, and no meat. According to their belief, meat and fish together will not give any benefit to our body. Salad and nuts is a must, except almonds. They would always eat fruits first before the main meal. Their belief if you eat the main meal first then fruits, this will make us feel sleepy and difficult to understand lessons in school. In Israel, smoking is a taboo. If you are a guest, don't smoke in their house, they would politely ask you to go out to smoke. According to scientists in universities in Israel, nicotine would destroy cells in our brain and will affect the genes and DNA, resulting in generations of moron or defective brain. All smokers please take note. The food intake for the child is always under the guidance of the parents. First, the fruits with almonds, followed by cod liver oil. In my assessment, most Jewish children know at least 3 languages, i.e. Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Since childhood they would be trained in playing the piano and violin, it is a must. They believe that this practice will increase the IQ of the child and will make him a genius. According to Jewish scientists, the vibration of the music would stimulate the brain. That is why there are lots of geniuses among the Jews. Since grade 1 to 6, they would be taught business mathematics. Science subjects would be their first preference. As comparison, ICLDC the IQ of children in California is about 6 years back. Jewish children are also involved in athletics such as archery, shooting and running. They believe that archery and shooting would make the brain more focused on decision making and precision. In high school, students are more inclined to study science. They would create products, indulge in all sorts of projects. But all attention is given seriously, especially if it is on armaments, medicine, or engineering. A successful project or idea would be introduced in higher institutes, polytechnics or universities. The business faculty is given more preference in the last year of university. Students in business would be given a project and they can only pass if their group can make a profit of $1 million US. Don't be surprised, this is the reality. And that is why half of the business in the world is held by the Jews. E.g., who designed the latest levis? It is being designed in an Israeli university by the Faculty of Business and Fashion. Have you seen how they pray? They always shake their heads. They believe this action will stimulate and provide more oxygen to the brain. Look at the Japanese, they always bow down their heads as their culture. Lots of them are smart, they love sushi. Is this a coincidence? In the USA, the commercial/trading center for the Jews are based in New York, catering only for the Jews. If any Jew has any beneficial idea, their committee will give free interest loans and will make sure the business prosper. Thus Jewish companies like Starbucks, Dell Computers, Coca-Cola, DKNY, Oracle, Levi's, Dunkin' Donut, Hollywood Films, and hundreds other businesses were given free sponsorship. Jewish medical graduates in New York were encouraged to register with them and allowed to practice privately with this interest-free loan. Now I know why most hospitals in New York and California always lack specialist doctors. Smoking will lead to generations of moron. During my visit to Singapore in 2005, I was surprised to see smokers are regarded as outcasts and the price of a pack of cigarettes is about $7. Like in Israel, it is a taboo. Singapore's form of government is similar to the Israelis. And that is the reason why most of their universities are of high standards, even though Singapore is only as big as Manhattan. Look at Indonesia, everywhere people are smoking. The price of a pack of cigarettes is very cheap, only 70 cents. The result is millions of people with very few intelligent. You can count the number of universities, what product they produce that they can be proud of, low technology, can't speak other than their own language. E.g., why is it so difficult for them to master the English language? All this is due to smoking, their diet, culture. In my thesis, I do not touch on religion or race, why the Jews are so arrogant that they were being chased around since the time of the Pharaoh until Hitler. For me it is about politics and survival. The bottom line is, can we produce intelligent generations just like the Jews? The answer could be yes. We need to change our daily habits of eating, parenting, etc., and maybe within 3 generations, it could be achieved. This I could observe in my grandson. For example, at the age of 9 he CLD write a 5-page essay on why I love tomato. May all of us be in peace and succeed in producing future generations of genius for the betterment of humankind, no matter who you are. What makes Jews so smart? I'm pooped. Natalie collapsed into her easy chair and fanned herself with her ever-present apron as she recounted her latest trip up north. My son, he's an editor, and my daughter, she's a photographer with some of her pictures in National Geographic, and their children, what can I tell you? My granddaughter just graduated from medical school and my grandson got accepted to a top law school. The youngest one, he just won first place in his high school science fair. And I'm not the only one, quelling over how my kids and grandkids made good. My friends could tell you the same stories. So I'm asking, what makes us Jews so smart? Natalie's question of, what makes us Jews so smart, is not a new one. In fact, if Nobel Prize winners are any indication, we Jews, a tiny minority of the world's population, have been among the best and the brightest for decades. In fact, Jinfo.org reports that between 1901 and 2018 at least 203 Jewish men and women have won the Nobel Prize, a number that represents 22% of all the individual recipients. When we look at Nobel statistics specific to the United States, in particular in the fields of chemistry, economics, physics, and medicine, 39% of Nobel winners are Jewish, an accomplishment made even more significant given that Jews are only 0.02% of the world's population. Then there are recent genetic studies, reported by Lazar Berman of the American Enterprise Institute, who writes, "There is ample scholarly work to suggest that Ashkenazi Jews, at least, have significantly higher IQs than surrounding populations." In Natural History of Ashkenazi Intelligence, Gregory Cochran, Jason Hardy, and Henry Harpending of the University of Utah conclude that Ashkenazi Jews have the highest average IQ of any ethnic group for which there are reliable data. Setting aside what some might term the genetic minefield, most parents and teachers, sociologists and scientists agree that for native intelligence to manifest itself in accomplishment, it must be recognized, nurtured, and appreciated. In fact, renowned psychologist and author Daniel Goleman in his book, Emotional Intelligence, notes that a high IQ does not always lead to a successful career. The EQ, or the emotional intelligence quotient, which includes traits such as optimism, determination, perseverance, and ability to work cooperatively with others, plays an important part in a child's eventual success, traits inherent in bar and bat mitzvah preparation and celebration. Could the answer to Natalie's question about how smart we Jews seem to be found in one of our oldest Jewish traditions? Having prepared dozens of students and officiated at 181 ceremonies, I suggest that the bar/bat mitzvah journey plays a critical role in the success our children have later in life. Boys become bar mitzvah at 13 years of age, girls at age 12, and both begin their studies during one of life's most awkward periods, the early teen, middle school years. Much has been written about the emotional turmoil inherent in this period, but it doesn't take a sociologist to observe that standing out in a crowd, speaking before a group, or having any of a myriad obvious differences, can create emotional havoc for young teens. Yet it is right at this developmental stage when Jewish boys and girls are required to set these obstacles aside and ascend the bima, to read from the Torah scroll and give a speech on the meaning of an ancient text. Dr. Thomas G. Plant suggests that, because the benefits are so great, not only Jewish teens but all teens should have a bar or bat mitzvah. Dr. Plant, a Catholic, has attended many bar/bat mitzvah celebrations, and he writes, "I wish that all religious traditions offered some variation on the theme of a bar/bat mitzvah." It is a remarkable opportunity for a young teen to carefully learn much about their religious tradition, have the chance to lead many parts of a serious and sacred religious service, and give a thoughtful sermon reflecting on sacred scripture. Dr. Plant speaks to the benefits when he concludes that the ceremony sends the message to the teen that there are many adults taking an interest in his or her development. It is a chance for the youth to become a more responsible and thoughtful member of the religious community, and, if we expect much from our youth in terms of ethics, thoughtfulness, and responsibility, we might actually get it. Not only does the bar/bat mitzvah experience represent a transition from childhood to young adulthood, the entire process from preparation to party gives our Jewish teens a tremendous sense of accomplishment at a critical time in their emotional development. In middle school, old ideas and behaviors are replaced by new ones, and decisions are made to go along with the crowd or to stand apart. The bar/bat mitzvah experience facilitates mental and emotional development at a time when our teens need it most. Why are we Jews so smart? Natalie asks. For me, the answer lies in one of our most treasured traditions, the bar and bat mitzvah. In commentary in April 2007, Charles Murray, the co-author of The Bell Curve, again made the claim that Jews are smarter than everyone else. In the bell curve, he and his late co-author, Richard Herrenstein, first presented their argument about the intellectual superiority of Ashkenazic Jews of European origins, who test higher than any other ethnic group. Jews in America and Britain have an overall IQ mean somewhere between a half and a full standard deviation above the mean, with the source of the difference concentrated in the verbal component. Murray again makes the argument of an unmistakable, Jewish genius, in commentary, but now with an explanation. Insofar as I am suggesting that the Jews may have had some degree of unusual verbal skills going back to the time of Moses, I am naked before the evolutionary psychologist's ultimate challenge. Why should one particular tribe at the time of Moses, living in the same environment as other nomadic and agricultural peoples of the Middle East, have already evolved elevated intelligence when the others did not? At this point, I take sanctuary in my remaining hypothesis, uniquely parsimonious and happily irrefutable. The Jews are God's chosen people. Who could resist such a claim, especially if it clearly echoes the view that Herrenstein and Murray made earlier that high intelligence also provides some protection against lapsing into criminality for people who otherwise are at risk? Jews are smarter and morally better than everyone else. At least they have smartiness, a quality analogous to, and proven by, TV comedian Stephen Colbert's parodic truthiness, truth that comes from the gut, not books. It isn't really that Jews are smarter than everyone else, it is just what everyone believes. Superior intelligence, selective inbreeding, and Jewish genetic diseases. This view of Jewish superior intelligence echoes another recent philo-Semitic argument explaining it. In 2006, Gregory Cochrane, Jason Hardy and Henry Harpending, all anthropologists at the University of Utah, made quite a splash with a published study which suggested that Jewish superior intelligence was the result of selective inbreeding. Their paper, Natural History of Ashkenazi Intelligence, argued that Jewish intelligence is simply a compensatory genetic error linked to other Jewish genetic diseases, like Tay-Sachs, Gaucher's disease, or Fanconi's anemia. As the authors write, perhaps most of the characteristic Ashkenazi genetic diseases fall into this category. Selection has imposed a heavy human cost, not crippling at the population level, cheaper than the malaria defense mutations like sickle cell and G6PD deficiency, but tragic nonetheless. This sounds like an updated version of the claim that the Parisian neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot made to Sigmund Freud in the fall of 1888 about the predisposition of Jews for specific forms of illness, such as diabetes, where the exploration is easy, you just have to attribute it to intermarriage, to too many cousins marrying cousins. The Jews may be smart, but the cost is that they are an ill people. This is uncomfortable. Smarter means more diseased. Smartiness is a sort of compensatory booby prize for a wide range of diseases ascribed to the Jews. Every brilliant Jew is simultaneously a frail Jew, living the life of the mind rather than that of the body. Now who but me is going to argue with the claim that Jews are smarter than everyone else, a racial myth that has its origin in the 19th century? Isn't it obvious? Just count the number of Nobel Prizes, violin virtuosi and so forth. Isn't Jewish inherited smartiness proven by the accomplishment of individual Jews? How many Jewish Nobel Prize winners or their families actually had any of the 8 diseases now called Jewish genetic diseases? If I had to trade off my PhD against the BRCA2 gene for breast cancer in my children, would it be worth it? Well, certainly if, as Charles Murray has it, it were part of the divine plan. Yet speaking about the Jews as a biological entity, or to use the new/old term, race, is tempting, especially if part of a divinely ordained plan. And yet there is a real disadvantage to this. Francis Collins, head of the American Human Genome Project, recently commented in The Economist. The downside of using race, whether in research or in the practice of medicine, is that we are reifying it as if it has more biological significance than it deserves. Race is an imperfect surrogate for the causative information we seek. To the extent that we continue to use it, we are suggesting to the rest of the world that it is very reliable and that racial categories have more biological meaning than they do. We may even appear to suggest something that I know is not true, that there are bright lines between populations and that races are biologically distinct. We need to know what we are and what we are not. The desire to draw these bright lines is perhaps intrinsic to human nature. The need to define and control, to identify from where succor or fear comes, is built into all social groups as central to their self-definition. We need to know what we are and what we are not. Now I could lose a screed against the creation of a unitary racial definition that lumps radically diverse people of radically diverse experience and background into a category labeled the Jews, or even Ashkenazi Jews. I could join the late Stephen Jay Gould among many others to inquire about the relationship between race and yet another suspicious category, intelligence. But is it worthwhile doing this? When you have two categories, both of which are created by social consensus, defining one in terms of the other leads to pure nonsense, as Murray and Herenstein showed in the bell curve, where the claim was that we could determine who would steal our hubcaps by IQ exams. Sadly, they did not ask whether such tests or claims about the relationship between IQ and race would predict who would loot Enron or Drexel Burnham. Claims about a divine Jewish smartiness seem just as superficial. Certainly there are corners of the world, such as Australia, where Jews bemoan the absence of smart Jews. One can point to the simple fact the 1954 Nobel Prize winner Max Born's granddaughter is Olivia Newton-John as evidence that there is a decay of smartiness when one goes south of the equator, at least if you detest the film Grease as much as I do. But just who is the German and Jewish and Scots Max Born? In Born's official Nobel biography, written at the time of his award, he was a German physicist who, as so many other German scientists, was forced to emigrate in 1933. How odd! And why were German scientists fleeing Germany in 1933? An example of German smartiness? The argument about Jewish smartiness rests on individual accomplishments, such as Nobel Prizes and violin virtuosi of those who are labeled or self-identified as Jews, and these individual accomplishments may well be a reflex of a culture of learning and performance by individuals placed in a specific diaspora situation. As Albert Einstein pointed out a long time ago, if my theory of relativity is proven successful, Germany will claim me as a German and France will declare that I am a citizen of the world. Should my theory prove untrue, France will say that I am a German and Germany will declare that I am a Jew. Being Jewish is only one identity for him, if an important one. He never made the same claim about his rather amateurish but passionate violin playing eliciting the envy of nations. Such categories as Jewish Nobel Prize winners are used to chronicle accomplishment of individuals, especially at moments when the social situation permits these individuals to excel and a group needs to identify with these accomplishments to answer charges of inherent difference and assumed inferiority. Pressure to excel and need to have heroes. Such smartiness declines as the pressure to excel in any identifiable group diminishes and the group ceases to need heroes. If this were not the case, the recent rapid decrease in the number of Jews who are applying to medical schools could mean that Jews may have lost God's grace but perhaps are also becoming less diseased or more at risk for criminality as their smartiness declines. Actually, what has happened in the United States is that self-identified Jews are fitting more closely into the profile of the American middle class. They are making choices about their professions based on their middle-class identity rather than the desires of their parents. Are the Jews also becoming healthier? Okay, maybe I would trade my PhD for a healthier body. It would be simpler than working out. But there is a larger, certainly less comic aspect to the bright line that the claim of Jewish smartiness makes and the role that non-Jews have had in this argument about Jewish superior intelligence ever since the late 19th century. There seems to be value to the claim that Jews are smarter than non-Jews if you are not Jewish. Self-identified non-Jews, such as Murray, in the 21st century, continue to make the claim of Jewish smartiness for reasons that have very little to do with philo-Semitism. The categories by which Jews are defined are the special relationship between God and the chosen people, or group inheritance genetics, or a mix of both as in the so-called evolutionary biologist, Kevin MacDonald's A People That Shall Dwell Alone, Judaism as a Group Evolutionary Strategy, which argued that Jewish smartiness created and perpetuated anti-Semitism as a means for group, genetic cohesion. We can think about these functions of Jewish smartiness in terms of what the psychoanalysts call projective identification. I so admire someone that I wish to be exactly like them. Yet I know that it is impossible for me to become them, so there is always a gap between my real self and my desire. And that gap between who I am and what I wish to be means that I must generalize about universals that capture all difference. Thus the gap between who I am and who I want to become can never be bridged, as I can never become Jewish in this absolute sense. All Jews are. If being Jewish means joining a peoplehood and a religious practice, no such barriers exist. They only exist in the absolute fantasy of inherent Jewish difference, even if this difference is defined in terms of smartiness. Evangelical Christianity and Judaism. Something very similar takes place within evangelical Christianity, which envies the Jews but detests Judaism, envies the Jews because they were God's first, chosen people, and are necessary for the plan of the end of days, but detests Jewish religious practice because the Jews continue to deny Christ and will convert at the end of days or be damned. No matter what, like Murray, the evangelicals can never be Jews. They remain always a poor simulacrum of Jewish belief or, in Murray's case, Jewish smartiness. Philo-Semitism creates the Jews as a universal and therefore poisoned category. All Jews are. The same happened, by extension, to the Israelis after the Six-Day War. They were all powerful and resistant and ethical. Since then and as international sympathy for the Palestinians has grown, when any given Israeli acts against type, all are damned as too powerful, too rigid, too corrupt. The stereotype of super Jew has transformed itself into Jewish barbarity. But there is yet another turn of the wheel in the debates about Jewish smartiness. By extension, no individual Jew today can be quite smart enough to fulfill the category of the stereotypical smart Jew. By this argument, if you are not a smart Jew, then you are not much of a Jew at all. The Jews are merely clever or facile or glib or superficial but not really smart. For, as the Philo-Semites like Murray and his ilk imply, my insight understands the essence of the Jews and thus I am in control of the bright line that defines the healthy from the sick, the smart from the merely clever. In the end, says Charles Murray, I am the smartest one of all. Concluding remarks. The reappearance of race within the medical and biological sciences attempts to explain characteristics ascribed to constructed populations through the new lens of genetics and related sciences. That these older categories have little or nothing to do with the new science is not evident. They carry with them much of the baggage of racism, including the so-called positive stereotypes of a group. Take-home message. Don't confuse racial categories with scientific ones. Don't assume that making positive comments about a group is necessarily a good thing.